Kyle,
Dave,
how's it going, buddy?
it's going, man. We have to immediately in this episode acknowledge the fact that we royally screwed up. And when we say we, I mean me, in inviting you to this podcast last week because we have just been learning how to use this app. And now we've discovered that you cannot invite somebody as a producer to this
Yeah.
if you want to be seen on the podcast. So that is a giant learning point for me. So we have no last week's episode because it would have been me talking to myself, which would have looked insane.
Alas, it was the lost episode.
It is the ancient lost episode of Jaguars v Packers, but luckily for the viewers, we will cover that tonight very briefly.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't get all the jokes and the puns in. Gotta have to keep my Uncle Jackie that story saved for later. We'll just, we'll roll with it.
Dave, there's something very important that we have to do at the beginning of this show, and I've been promising my daughter this for weeks, and I haven't followed through on this yet. But Casey has a gym teacher by the name of Mr. T. I don't know what it stands for. It could stand for plenty of things. I'd come up with some ideas for what it could stand for if this wasn't a family-friendly podcast. However, it is, and Mr. T has been viewing the Lambeau Lounge. He's even
Mr.
gone
T.
as far as to comment on YouTube. So my daughter has been very adamant that we acknowledge Mr. T. So Mr. T, if you're watching, thank you for watching. Thank you for being the one person who is religiously watching this.
It's an honor, Mr. T. If you comment your actual name, we'll give you a real shout out. And, might even send you a prize package if we reach 100 subscribers, because you were the first. The prize package, it'll just be an autograph picture of me. That's all at this point. And I am no one, so.
Is that the best we can do?
I remember, so this has nothing to do with the Packers, but in middle school, I hosted a talent show. I was the MC, and for the grand prize, they gave out $100 and everything, but I played it up that it was an autograph picture of me. I just posed on the couch, and then I signed it after the fact. So, I just give this picture of an underage Dave just sitting on a couch in a very provocative manner, autographed and signed in front of 200 parents. And
how large were you in grade school, Dave, still? You're a large man, but how
I was, so you can't really tell here. I'm 6'6", probably about 380. I was definitely a lot slimmer back then. I was probably around 6'4", maybe 300, 315 range.
In what grade?
Probably that was probably what, 9th grade? 9th, 10th grade?
As a freshman, you were...
Yeah, I was already 6'4", 300.
Ooh,
yeah, I was a big boy. Was a big boy. I remember
you were bullying people at school for sure.
I wasn't. That's just the thing, is I wasn't even a bully. I was just, and every bully says that. But I mean,
no. I meant more in the sports setting of life than like regular bully. You're a decent enough guy, Dave.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't have this thing called athleticism, Kyle, so I wasn't able to make it.
I don't see that being true. But either way, let's move past the personalisms. We have to touch on this Packers v Jaguars game. Which was a Packers victory, which is the most important part of that whole thing. We come out with a dub there. A couple things that I want to touch on from that game, just to debrief it very quickly. So we know everybody knows by now that Jordan Love gets hurt in that game in the first quarter. It ends up being something that kind of carries over. He tries to fight through it. We talked a lot about, I'm not going to try to reference this other podcast we did too much because it's going to sound crazy because it doesn't exist as far as the viewing is concerned. But
half of it exists. You talking to a blank abyss exists.
Well, we talked about his toughness, like mental toughness, obviously physical toughness. He tried to push through that. It wasn't something that was going to last forever. And eventually it kind of culminated, and he had to step out of that game. So we saw Malik Willis again, and that is kind of a shock, to be honest, to see Malik out there again this season. Because Jordan Love typically for the seasons or for the games that he's been playing hasn't been super injury prone. So definitely tough to see him go out, again this season, because you thought that maybe the Eagles game we escaped him being hurt for long term, and then we kind of have it pulled back into question if Jordan Love is going to be good again going forward, or what that's going to be, the long lasting effects of this groin injury are going to be going forward. So then is Malik going to be taking over for a couple weeks? We got the Lions coming up, right? So like that's a huge concern. And we can kind of get to where that goes eventually, but that's kind of what we were looking at in that game. A lot of question marks. And then can we finish out on the Jaguars and win that game? The key points that I thought from that game that were super important is, again, Matt LaFleur's resistance to just absolutely shutting down under pressure, and the preparedness that this team has for adversity. I think that the Packers defense kind of bent in that game a little bit and didn't give us the best shot to finish, but the Packers offense finished strong, and ultimately we were able to come out with a game-winning field goal. Man, it has to really be hurting the Narv dog right now to see some of these game-winning field goal opportunities.
It kind of hurts me as well, Kyle. Actually, it hurts me quite a bit. I miss you, Braden. Call me back.
We know that big players make big-time plays in the NFL when they're needed. Sometimes it's play calling combined with players making great plays. The Jaden Reed pass downfield ends up setting up that field goal. A couple of disciplined runs down near the goal line that didn't put it in the end zone gave us an opportunity to kick a pretty short field goal for the win, and we did just that. So that's what I have from the Jaguars game. I'm not going to spend too much on that. All we knew coming out of that was that Jordan Love was questionable going into the Lions game, and we watched that throughout the week. Do you have any key takeaways? I know that was a long rant on my part, but
only thing I would say is just that game, it showed how good Matt LaFleur has been this season. Because, yes, Malik Willis coming in has overperformed, but Matt LaFleur already having established packages for him where it complements his abilities. Because you look at where he was in Tennessee, he couldn't succeed in any system that they put him in. I believe they went through 2 different coaches, and neither were able to really utilize him as well as Matt LaFleur has. So just Matt's game planning and able to complement him, I think that says a lot about him. And Brandon McManus kicking that game-winning field goal was painful for me because he's a terrible person.
Well, Dave, I wanted to make a reference, which I also made last week, but I'm going to make it this week so it's relevant in 2 weeks. We've been predicting scores of games now for a long time, and I haven't been keeping score until recently because it hasn't been super relevant. We've been off on a few picks, which I don't know if it's just our lack of football knowledge or the Packers are outplaying our expectations or what. But Dave, particularly in the Jaguars game, to wrap this segment up, I don't remember exactly what we predicted without looking back. I do have it on my sheet if you'd like me to. I can. But what I distinctly remember is that I called the spread on this game very, very accurately. And unfortunately, Dave, I was much closer in my prediction than you were, which is going to be the same as the Lions game, I hate to tell you. But that's 2 weeks in a row, Dave. And there's a particular part in one Happy Gilmore movie where they are getting the ball onto the green. And, Shooter McGavin does his thing. He's, doing his shooter. And Happy Gilmore is right there with him. And, Happy puts it just a little bit closer on the green, Dave. And he turns to A1 Shooter McGavin and he goes, "Somebody's closer." And that's it's not doing Adam Sandler any justice as me impersonating it. But for all intents and purposes, it is me telling you that I, in my predictions, am closer than you. I just wanted you to know that.
Couple things there. One, does that help you sleep at night better, Kyle? is that what you needed? Kyle, I feel like a big, strong man now, picking games. 2, I don't actually see a fin on your back, so it doesn't seem like you're a shark. Keep that shit to Las Vegas. Dude gets one spread right, and all of a sudden he's just like, I am a gambling god.
I'm just saying, Dave. When I was traveling back from Pennsylvania recently, I made some gambling choices that initially I thought that I shouldn't have, but I came out on the right end of that as well. So maybe it's just a particular season of my life that I'm doing well in. The rest has been going.
I would like to point out one of us is more optimistic about the Green Bay Packers, where one is a lot more pessimistic. and I
So
know that they would call it a
I'm not,
realist.
we're gonna get to that in this podcast. So you better stick to that same narrative later. Don't change up on me.
Oh
All
no,
right.
don't worry. I am always going to back the green and gold.
All right. Um, so let's just fast forward right then into the week of the Lions game. So we know key injury heading in was Jordan Love. There was some other questions of the Packers defense, which was Jair Alexander, and then Evan Williams as well was another huge one. And then Matt LaFleur even talked about it leading up to the Lions game. Is that at the absence of Evan Williams in that game and potentially Jair were going to be huge. And we all know what a loss Jair is to the defense each week that he's out, that he doesn't play. But we also see that these new additions to the team can be huge losses for their defensive schemes, and they force guys in that maybe aren't quite at the level that these guys are advancing and maturing in the league yet. Particularly Evan Williams, who has played a really good season up until this point. So, and then you're asking Bullard and other guys to step into that role. So we had some injury concerns going into the Lions week. Unfortunately, Evan doesn't end up playing. Jair doesn't end up playing. Both kind of just surprising to me. I didn't know that they were injured until they were listed or until people started talking about it. So I didn't see. I don't know if I missed something in the actual Packers game against the Jaguars that that would have made it evident that they were going to be out the next week. But I know Jair kind of tweaked his hamstring or something in the end zone on the Evan Ingram touchdown pass. It looked like he kind of tweaked something there a little bit, but you don't know how serious those things are and if guys can overcome that during the practice week. So,
Well, that's the thing
um,
about injuries too, because you can walk around and look fine, but like if you're cutting and running at the speeds that they are, and you're feeling like even an ounce of pain to that level where you can't efficiently cut right or move right, then you're going to get eaten alive on the field. So you almost have to sit out at that point, you know?
yeah, I've noticed a lot in the NFL that there's been a lot of hamstring and quad injuries, which is interesting because I feel like I feel like we never have seen the amount of those injuries as I've seen on the injury list this year for all teams, not just for the Green Bay Packers, which is interesting. I wonder if it's something similar to what Christian Watson was going through, where there's some unevenness potentially in some of the hamstring areas of the legs, and they're trying to iron that out because when they are running at full speed, they're not able to kind of even that weight distribution out or whatever the case is. I'm certainly not any type of you know
You want to
physical.
know what it really is, Kyle?
Sure.
They used to be able to take Oxycontin and play football. That's That's really it. I mean, Brett Favre was zoinked out of his mind on like half a bottle of oxys out there throwing. The man wasn't even, he was put together by screws and bolts and Oxycontin.
And Parkinson's.
Yeah, well, that came later.
Oh, sorry. Too
You
soon.
can't, you can't bang your head on the concrete all the time and not expect a little bit of Parkinson's.
That's true. Do you remember how zonked Aaron Rodgers was in that Bears game a few years back, Dave?
My knee.
They just they're like, "Hey, Aaron." They opened a medicine cabinet back in the locker room of the Green Bay Packers. They're like, "Take your pick, Aaron."
I want a picture. He's just like, no, no, I don't want to take anything. My body's a temple. And they're just like, but Aaron, it'll release your chakras. He's like, my chakras, you say?
There's some doctor somewhere, some sports scientist that was back there that was like, "Aaron, how about this dark tent with no light inside of it?" And he was like, "Yes, that is the ticket.
Ooh.
I have candy, Aaron."
I just would love to see him come out of the blue tent just in the total darkness.
There's smoke bellowing out of the blue tent.
Imagine, no, here's a scenario. So you have a new doctor on the field. He just got hired by the Jets. Aaron Rodgers goes down. He goes in to do an evaluation, and it's a pitch dark room. He's like, what the heck? And they're like, no, this is what Aaron does. We're actually not allowed to have light in when we evaluate him.
But doctor doesn't. Never mind. I could go on forever. Tangent. Anyways, let's focus back on the Lions game here. So we had some key injuries going into the Lions game, Dave.
Yeah.
we both had our predictions. I thought this was going to be a tough one for the Green Bay Packers. The Lions are at the top of their game. They just absolutely smoked Tennessee the week before they came in and played us at home. It doesn't seem like home field advantage was as much of a home field advantage when you're playing a team that's that locked in on both sides of the ball. Jared Goff has an MVP bid probably going, and it's completely relevant, I think, to think that he should be considered for something like that. There's a few other guys in there too that could rise to the top by the end of the year. Who knows if the play will, by certain guys like Baker Mayfield will fall off completely or what the case will be. But I think there's a couple out there that are giving him a run for his money. But right now, Jared Goff looks really good in that offense. So
Yeah, I mean, pouring rain and 30-mile-an-hour winds also don't really help a home field advantage either.
yeah, so like that. I mean, it's tough, right? You're not going to have the same crowd energy as you would have on a regular Lambeau day.
No.
Although fans probably outlasted any other fan base, to be honest, that would have been in those conditions.
Oh, yeah.
To be But I knew this was going to be a tough game going in for the Green Bay Packers. I predicted they lose. I think I predicted they lose by 8. They end up losing this game by 10. So another close prediction there. I know that you picked in favor of the Green Bay Packers for this one, and I don't blame you for picking in favor of them. It just ends up being a tough game. So a few things from the game debrief. We have Amon-Ra St. Brown coming into this game, Dave, who's wearing a sweatshirt that says Green Bay sucks. Now, he did not separate Green Bay when he had it on his sweatshirt. He put it as one word, which says a lot in itself. If you're going to slander us, Dave, slander us with proper English, all right?
Yeah.
That's what I need.
You think a man that can speak 3 different languages would know how to spell Green Bay?
Yeah, I was upset, but I thought that it really set the stage well, and I said, man, this is going to be a tough day if everybody on the Detroit Lions is in this mindset, which they obviously were. I thought that we started the game on a good note, man. I thought that Josh Jacobs looked really good running the ball early. He was a beast, as he usually has been for Green Bay. He's running the ball very well. Packers offense looked decent. We end the first drive with a field goal, and I'm thinking, man, all right, we're off on the right foot here. We're getting points on the board. It looked fairly easy, and just maybe some missed opportunities at the end of the drive. But you like a opening drive where you can take it down the field, not stall out, and get points on the board. That's a good thing. We have a key fourth down conversion on the first drive for the Lions that ends up putting them up 7-3. Nixon gets beat on that one. And I mean, that's a good throw and catch. It's not anything that I don't think that it's not poor play. It's good coverage.
I mean, Nixon kind of got baited in with that inside juke, and like if you know Amon-Ra St. Brown, like I don't think he's coming over the middle. Like he's more of a guy that's going to try to fight you on the outside. He can work through the middle, but I don't think he's trying to take that big hit. It's just a shame because that's one of those plays that if Jair was there, it might not have went down the same way. But hey, that's what happens. Injuries happen. So Nixon got beat.
So we missed an opportunity in the next drive for the Packers. Packers get the ball, take it down. We have an opportunity for I believe that was the Bo Melton headshot, which is interesting. We could talk about that for a second. That's a big talking point around the NFL, even after that. So I've heard a lot of takes on this throughout the week, and I'll give you my take on it. Is I've never liked the ejections in college football. I think they're nonsense. I think that for one play at the speeds that these guys play at, to hit somebody in the helmet to helmet, should it be a penalty? Yeah, I agree with the penalties behind it. I definitely agree with the NFL reviewing stuff, and if their course of action is to hand out some kind of fine for it, that's on them. I really don't like taking money away from the players and disciplining them that way. I would like to see it throughout the course of like maybe half the season. If you accumulate some stuff, then the league can look at that and hand out what they need to hand out. But I've never been a fan of the ejections in college football. I'm not a fan of it in the NFL. And upon first sight of this hit, I thought that it looked malicious. That's what I thought. And my opinion on that did not change. I thought that the ball was clearly not playable. It was not a ball that he was going up to try to make some kind of crazy catch on, and he just got hit at the end. This was definitely a deliberate choice to go in and to hit him in the helmet. So, like, I don't mind the penalty there. I just don't like the ejection. And, they talked about the role. Who was it, Dave, for the Lions that hit him?
It
I'm blank.
was Brian Branch, the safety out
Right.
of Alabama.
Yep. So they talked about what a big piece of the defense he is for Detroit. Obviously, that's a huge loss for them, and they seem to do just fine without him. But um, I mean, that's a huge loss, right? Like that's like the Packers losing a McKinney, or like the Packers losing a Bullard, or like even an Evan Williams type player. So like that would be a huge loss for the Green Bay Packers if they were to take that. So I don't like the precedent of ejecting players for that. I know that they said, well, it came from New York. It didn't come from the refereeing crew in Green Bay. But I don't like it at all. I don't like the ejection. I like the penalty. Thought it was malicious. Didn't like it. But I certainly didn't like the ejection. How you feeling about that choice? Because that's the first time that we've seen an ejection like that straight up in the NFL for something that's not like a fight or something like completely egregious for like helmet to helmet contact. How do you feel about it?
Honestly, I think that's football. That's one of those things where I grew up. I watched. You probably remember him too, Bob Sanders, the old safety out of Indianapolis. He was he was a defensive MVP of the year. The man laid down wood. He was known for destroying anybody who came over the middle. Troy Polamalu, he'd take your head off. That's to me, that's football. Granted, the game has changed. Now there's not
Ed,
really a
Ed
place
Reed,
for it.
Ed Reed, same way, man.
Ed Reed,
John,
it was.
we could go for a while on that.
But Bob Sanders really was the one that stood out to me because that man, he was undersized, but man, could he hit! And that was one of those plays where, say if it was early thousands back, yeah, that's not even a penalty at that point. Uh, I don't really like what the game has changed to. But when you go into modern rules and player safety, I mean, Brett Favre has Parkinson's, so we don't want players getting hit like that. Otherwise, you can have those types of injuries and such, and there's not a guardian cap that's going to protect you against a hit like that. So I don't particularly like the penalty, even though it helped the Packers. I definitely don't like the ejection. Like you can't, like if imagine that they're setting up a precedent now that this could happen in the playoffs. Say all of a sudden Patrick Mahomes throws to insert fifth string wide receiver here. Somebody just makes a good hit on him. Now he's getting ejected. I think that's a way that the NFL can manipulate things. I think that they should always follow the two when you're done. So say they give you the warning on the first hit, say, hey, that was malicious, unsportsmanlike, blah, blah, blah. You don't do that again, you're fine. If he does it again, second time after the warning, yeah, eject him. Then you're fine. But a one hitter and now you're a quitter? No, I don't like that. I don't think there's a spot for that in the NFL. Again, I guarantee you, and write this down, this will happen again, and this will help a team that probably people won't like. So, it's unfortunate that it happened. I don't agree with it. But afterwards, what happened with Brian Branch flipping off the crowd, I thought that was hilarious. Thought that was where I laughed because it reminded me of old rivalries. David Bakhtiari's last game as a Packer, it was him flipping off Bear fans. You know, Randy Moss mooning the fans after scoring a touchdown. I love that. That's football. That's fun to me. It's a real rivalry. It's not something that's made up. It's something that's real to these guys. They want to go out there. They want to play. I loved that whole transaction. And yeah, Packers got an extra 15 out of it. I thought it was pretty funny. Honestly, if I was a Lions fan, I'm getting that picture of him flipping off the crowd and I'm getting them to sign it.
Uh, yeah, I think that whole thing. Obviously, I give my opinion on it, but like when opportunities like that arise, right? Because that would have caused a fourth down for the Green Bay Packers. So that was a big play in the game, like
Yeah.
to that point. And the fact that the Packers had 1st and 10 with an opportunity to go capitalize after a 30-yard penalty essentially is insane, right? And it's like I think like if you zoom out of that scenario, you see like bad hit on one of your guys, right? And then you see this guy taunting the crowd. And now, like, if I'm the offense, I'm fired up. Like, we got to go make a play. We got to go put points on the board.
Yeah.
And we got to finish the drive with a touchdown, right? Like, it's how we respond to this happening to one of our own that matters, right? And so the Packers' response to this unfortunately, which kind of set a tone for some things in this game, I feel like, was we miss a field goal. That's how this drive ended. And so, and it's not no fault of McManus. I mean, ultimately it falls on him, right? He missed the field goal, but like the weather conditions are terrible. It was a 40+ yard field goal. Like you're not going to be able to kick accurately in those kind of conditions, anyways. Like like repeatedly at least. Like he didn't push it by that much. He just pushed it. So,
If I'm correct, wasn't there a pre-snap penalty too that ended up making that like a 2nd and 15 or something, and then they kind of stalled out after that too?
I don't remember a pre-snap penalty per se, but you could be absolutely right about that. I'd have to go back and watch it. I just remember that it seemed like we took absolutely no advantage, we didn't take any take advantage of that at all. After being handed good field position after that, so that was kind of disappointing that we didn't have anything in the bag for that, and that we end up really just leaving points out there to be had. So that ends up being a Lions take it down, field goal 10-3. And then, man, we got to talk about this play because this is probably the biggest swing in the entire game, to be honest. So we have a 10-3 football game. We have a 1 touchdown game, Dave, between us and the best team in the division. And with very short time left in the first quarter, Jordan Love, man, throws an absolutely egregious interception, which ends up being a pick six and puts the Lions up 17-3. And so, like, now we're down 2 touchdowns off of just a terrible throw. And just, I don't know what he was thinking there. There was a lot of people talking about that play because we talked a lot about, me and you are going to talk about this probably hundreds of times before the end of the season is done. But I mean, goodness gracious, man, the hero ball stuff is just out of control. It's out of control. We're trying to force stuff where it's not there, and it's hurting the team. Fortunately for Jordan Love, a lot of these scenarios have worked out. A lot of these hero ball throws have worked out, and like we're living and dying by Jordan Love in some respect. But man, oh man, those throws, especially near our own goal line, when we can just their guys are just going to walk that into the end zone. I mean, that's a tough one to take, man, as a fan, and watch that and be like, oh man,
Well,
like
that was
watch
the
that.
thing too. They were driving, and it was a second down again. I don't know what it is about Jordan and second down, but as soon as second down comes, he has to throw it to the other team. It's just a curse.
It's tough, dude. So that was a huge one. I mean, do you have anything to say on that interception? I really feel like that was a turning point in this game for momentum because I feel like until that point, we take that down there, even if we don't get points, even if we just drive down the field, run out the clock. I mean, this is a 10-3 football game.
Yeah, it makes it reachable still.
Granted, the Lions are getting the ball at halftime, but we would have had more than enough time to build a comeback. It just makes that now if the Lions get the ball and go score a touchdown, let's say hypothetically that happens, which it does happen, but hypothetically before the first half, even if they did that, now it's a 2-score game and we have that ground to make up. If we give them 7 points before the half and they go score after halftime, now this is 3 scores and dude, you're playing the best team in the division with still a good defense and secondary. That is a really, really large mountain to try to climb, which is exactly what ends up happening to the Green Bay Packers. So, before I move on with the second half, which is much more brief than the first half, do you have anything to say about the Jordan Love interception? How do you feel about it?
I think what makes it worse too is coming into this game. I think they messed up a lot of the game plan, and I think that even the decision to, instead of deferring and being in that mentality of, oh, we're going to get the ball right away and such, I feel like when you're playing a team that's as good as the Lions, you got to play chess a little bit, and the Packers were playing checkers. I think that beginning, you should have ended up kicking the ball away just so they don't have that potential to double dip. And that's what ended up happening. Not only did they double dip, they pretty much triple dipped because same mentality, like you said. What if they get the ball in the second half now and then they get a touchdown? You don't want to be down by 2. Jordan feels more pressure. He ends up throwing a terrible ball, and now you're down by 3 touchdowns. So I think that's just where management needs to be a little bit better on that. You need to be able, if Andy Reid is deferring and he's kicking it, then you kick it. If it was overtime, I get it. You take the ball, you want the chance to score a touchdown to win the game. But regular season, beginning of the game, defer that, move on. Win and move on. Jordan pressured, tried to do too much, as has been kind of the case with Jordan this year. And it ended up biting us in the butt. He threw it directly to Kirby Joseph. I don't know what he saw when he got rid of that ball. It's been a few times where he's thrown balls where he's just not seeing the guy. And I don't know if that's where he's getting tunnel vision or what, but I much would have rather to him take that sack. Even if you take a knee, then you take it into the second half. But that was bad management all around between LaFleur, between Jordan. And that's really what that game was in a nutshell, wasn't it? It was the Packers beat themselves. Because when you look at the total stats, they didn't get outplayed by the Lions. They just outplayed themselves. Has been kind of the deal this whole season anytime the Packers lose.
Yeah, I mean, to touch on your point real quick about the deferring and the receiving type situation. Yeah, I mean, especially when we're playing in these kind of weather conditions, right? Like I want to see the other team get that ball first if we have that opportunity, because I want to see what the struggles are going to be of this team, what is working, what's not, how's the ball being handled, is it, that we need to equip every player with a towel out there to make sure that everybody's not slipping and sliding all over the place, so we still can, have gloves that are, somewhat sticky. Can we have guys holding onto the ball if we're running it consistently? Are we having trouble passing the ball accurately because of the wind speed? I want to know all that stuff, right? And that's stuff that you know a little bit from pregame warmups and stuff like that. But like until the game actually gets going at full speed, like you're not going to know that. And if you have even a little bit of an advantage by seeing the other team do that first, I think that you go out there and you do that. So we can end on that, but to your point further, right? Like we're playing catch up now. We're playing catch up big time, and like this isn't like run the ball slowly down the field, to try to catch up type football. Because what the Detroit Lions do is they come out from the half and they end up with a pretty decent run by Gibbs, which ends up making it 24-3. So,
yeah, you know what that game was in a nutshell, Kyle? It was a terrible hot dog. Ketchup, no mustard.
Yeah, I mean, are you a relish guy?
You give me mustard and you give me some grilled onions. I forget what that's actually called. I know Chicago has a special name for it, but I hate Chicago. So, but you give me a good hot dog, grilled onions, just slop on a ton of mustard, no ketchup ever. And that's a problem. In Green Bay, that's how the game went down. Too much ketchup. No ketchup. We're not ketchup kind of people.
Yeah, it was definitely a catch-up type game, and then like the stats can be deceiving in those kind of games because I feel like the team that's winning so substantially can kind of take a back seat a little bit. They can run the clock, they can produce less yards, they don't have to force the ball down the field and get big chunk plays and make some mistakes or something like that along the way. They can kind of sit back and enjoy that lead and kind of cushion that, and be willing to give up, a score if need be, just to get the ball back in their hands. And that's exactly what the Detroit Lions did. They played the game very well. They obviously had a game plan coming in that was, I feel like, evenly matched with ours. I didn't feel like we were outmatched per se, but I felt like they just played better. They outplayed us. And that's really what happened in the first half. And then mistakes on top of it. And then you have yourself just a 10-point loss is what you have at the end of the day. We ended up getting a field goal in the midst of the second half, which made it 24-6. And then we had a late score by Emmanuel Wilson, which makes it 12-24, and we convert in the 2-point conversion. So, ultimately 24-14 is the loss there to the Detroit Lions. Again, a lot of factors involved in this, key injuries, but you can't make excuses. The team's got to still come out and perform. I wrote in my notes for this game, and this is something that's going to transition us perfectly into our next segment here. But I wrote in my notes during the game when I was watching. I couldn't help but notice it. Preston Smith and Quay Walker were getting absolutely bullied throughout this game. And they were getting moved off the ball egregiously. And not only was it excuse me, that they're getting moved off the ball 5 yards down the field, but they were also shooting gaps that just made absolutely no sense. Preston looked like he was just lost out there. And Quay Walker's kind of the same thing. It's just like you're playing that, inside Mike position, but like your responsibility is to close those gaps, is to get downhill and go make plays. And when you can't do that, you are that 5 yard marker down the field. So when guys break that 5 yard marker and they're getting blocked and pushed down the field, you're giving them a 5 yard cushion off the line if the defensive line isn't already involved and clogging those lanes up. Like I played a fair amount of, well, actually, I played middle linebacker almost my whole life in football, and I'm not an NFL or college player by any means, but as far as assignments go, a lot of that stuff gets more advanced at those levels, but the assignments don't really change, right? Like you're still looking at accomplishing the same goals in a run defense. The only variables are if it's a blitz or if it's some kind of coverage scheme, right? But generally, if you're playing a zone coverage as a middle linebacker, you're just dropping slightly back into coverage, and that's something that's going to happen on a pass play. You have to read that, right? So, um, it's a rough thing to watch those guys time and time again, and I think that transitions us well into, well, if that's happening in this game, what else have I not been paying attention to within the organization? We've talked a lot about the edge and the D line positions that the Packers have been struggling with and maybe need some additions for. And lo and behold, we talked about the trade deadline, but Preston Smith ends up getting traded for a 2026 seventh rounder, which is interesting because people said, oh, it's for a bag of chips and all this other stuff that are talking online. I thought it was interesting too. When he got traded, Aaron Jones commented on one of Preston's posts and was saying basically that, and like, oh, they wanted all of us out of there, which is interesting because as I'll let you talk about it. But Dave, didn't he himself want to be traded from the Green Bay Packers? So it wasn't that the Packers organization necessarily wanted him out as much as he might have felt that way, but he did request to be traded.
Yeah, couple things. I'll touch on Preston Smith in a second. I know when we talked about our podcast last week, it's funny, we actually brought up Quay Walker, and we were saying the fact of, I think that Luke Wilson honestly should have been the one starting that game because you look at that Mike position, Luke Wilson plays with more instincts, and he takes on blocks, something that Quay just doesn't do. And I don't know if it's a problem in between the ears with Quay or what, but Quay's not playing good football. The team is honestly a lot better with Luke Wilson playing. Uh, Getting back to uh, Preston. So Preston did request a trade a few weeks back. He said that in his interview with Pittsburgh, just in the fact of he his whole career for the last 9 years has played as a 3-4 linebacker and not a 4-3 end. So different assignments. He's a guy that likes to stand up instead of putting his hand in the dirt. It just didn't really suit him. And you could see where he ended up getting kind of brushed off the line a lot more. He really wasn't effective in the run game. He wasn't getting the sack production that he's used to. It's kind of a sad way to end his 5.5 years in Green Bay. He ended up getting, I believe, something like 40 to 50 range of sacks. It's really, really high. I love him for the time that he spent with Green Bay Packers. I hate to see him go. And for the bag of chips comment, I think that when you're saving a total of around, I believe it's like 29-30 million dollars over the next few years, it's a pretty expensive bag of chips. So I think they saved 2 million this year, 18 million next year, and then the year after that I believe it's like 6 million that they saved. Don't quote me on the numbers, but it's around that range. So future wise, I think that financially it's good because $18 million, you can get a pretty decent player for $18 million a year.
Do you know the stats this year for Preston by like offhand or no?
I think that he had 2 sacks, I believe, this year so far, which is definitely underwhelming for him. He's normally like anywhere from like a 8 to 10 sack guy. That's what you consider a successful year for Preston. Obviously, he had that 1 year with the Smith brothers where I think he ended up ranking up to like 16 and a half. Really impressive season for him. But no, it's sad to see him go. Preston was definitely one of those guys, and he was one of those guys that in 2019 when they ended up picking up all those free agents, Billy Turner, Adrian Amos, my boy Zedarius, and then Preston. It was cool to see the energy that they brought, and they helped revitalize the 2020s for the Green Bay Packers. So to see him be that last domino to leave, last domino to fall, if you say, it's sad to see. I'm not the happiest about him leaving, especially because he is a locker room guy. He's a guy that his presence would be needed towards, playoff time. He could have come up big, but they want to get more snaps to the young guys. You saw in that Lions game, Aaron Mosby got credited with a half sack. He only played 7 snaps. So 7 snaps already getting a half sack. Pretty sure you start adding up snaps wise, that man's on pace for a Hall of Fame career in Green Bay. So plus Aaron Mosby,
Oh,
he had a pretty big preseason. I see there's also Bretton Cox, the undrafted free agent out of Oregon 2 years back, I believe. So we have young guys on the roster that they're going to want to give more snaps to, including Lucas Van Ness, including Enigbari.
yeah. I think an important thing to cover here too is that the Packers have obviously recognized the fact that there are some things lacking on this defensive line. And so when we talk about a guy like Preston Smith who has such a elite history in Green Bay, I think it's interesting to talk about, maybe the Packers organization is starting to look at things a little bit differently as far as the defensive line is concerned. So we're seeing these issues from the outside looking in as fans, but obviously the Packers organization is seeing these things on the field, right? And so, and they're seeing it in practice and wherever else they see it week in and week out. The Packers organization, and I think it's across the board. Like every radio talk show I've heard, every post I've seen, supported the narrative that they were going to try to keep Braden as Narvison as long as they possibly could. And it's a little bit new, that Goody would move in and try to make some moves in the middle of the season and get involved. But that's what needed to happen for the Packers to succeed, and that's what was done, right? It got done. The Preston thing is interesting to me because, ultimately, he's struggling on the field. It's not even a question mark to me if he is or isn't. He is. Quay is. Van Ness is struggling on the line. There is some defensive line help that is needed for this team to be super successful. Can they still win games? Yes, they can. But is it going to be, there's a difference between competing and getting the job done, doing enough to where we're going to have to be put in a position in some games to put pressure on the quarterback to make people uncomfortable. If a really great example is tonight with the Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens game that's going on. I watched the first half before we started doing this, and to make Lamar less of who Lamar is, you have to be able to pressure him. You have to be able to put pressure on him and contain him. Both things kind of simultaneously because, you can pressure him, but he's still going to get outside the pocket. And then what do you do then, right? The guy's fast. He's incredibly athletic. But can the Packers do that? I don't know. With this defensive line, it seems like even if we were to put pressure on the quarterback, right? Who do we have to contain? And so it makes it really, really difficult. I don't think that we're putting a ton of pressure on the quarterback right now. In fact, I think we're dead last in that category in the league. So that's a huge concern, and they have to address that. Or this team's not going to get very far into whatever playoff run they end up making if they make one. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
4-man pressure or 4-man packages, they're not getting any type of pressure at all. Really, when you see sacks, it's because Halfley's scheming up exotic blitzes, whether it's Cooper or, a cornerback off the edge or even Xavier McKinney, that's really just their pressure this season hasn't been good. And that's where, honestly, who needs to step up is Rashawn Gary. He's the one getting paid to win these reps, and he's not winning them.
Yeah, I think we've seen it with Clay Matthews and stuff before too, and Raji and all the other guys that came before them. I'm putting pressure on Gary to be elite because he can be elite, because we know that he can be, and he's young enough to, and he's determined and athletic enough, right? Like, we know all these things about Rashawn Gary. But what we also know like, for your big highlighted players, right? Like, if you were to tell me, like, hey, as an opposing team, we have to highlight one defensive player who's going to be a friggin' problem if we don't address it. Like, to me, like, that's a Rashawn Gary. Like, that he is a problem if we do not address this. And so I think teams are game planning for that, and they know what percentage he blitzes, and they know what he looks like when he is. And I think they're starting to address that. But I think without defensive line help, like, that just makes it so much easier to contain him. But like, if you have a defensive line who's beating these guys off the edge, like, I don't even like, then it's everything we have to worry about. We have to worry about the edge rushers. We have to worry about, like, these guys clogging up the middle of the field. We're not going to be able to run on them. Okay, so then we have to pass. Well, then when we have to pass, we have to worry about the edge rushers and the defensive line, and plus Rashawn Gary. That's too much to handle, right? I think that the Halfway defense, if they add pieces in the offseason, like, and in the draft, like, it's going to be phenomenal. I really like his defensive system. I don't think that he's doing a poor job at all. I think, unfortunately, there's some pieces in the system that really aren't meshing well together at the moment, which is causing the Green Bay defense to be kind of average or below average as a whole. Let's do it this way, right? So if I had to give the Packers defense a grade right now, like, and just grade them as a whole, right? I say they're a solid C plus defense. Like, that's what I think. I think that we have elite players. I think we have some great younger players when we're healthy. But I think that our defensive line is our biggest weakness. And when you put that all together, I think that's a really tough thing to say that we have an elite group there. And that's more than that. Maybe a B minus if I'm being generous, right? But that's what I grade them. But the hard part of that is then if you take, like, our coverage guys and our defensive line, like, and separate that out, like, those grades are way, way, way contrasting. Like, I feel like our coverage guys are super solid for the most part, even in the B plus range or maybe A minus range, even if I'm being honest with myself. But like, the defensive line is poor. It's poor right now. And we got to figure that piece out. And that's a D plus C minus type thing, I think. I mean, if you want to give it in terms of grades for yourself, feel free. You're a guy that likes to watch the big guys go to work, so maybe you're seeing stuff I'm not. But this defensive line group is a little rough right now.
Yeah, no, it's like you said. Honestly, it's just incredibly underwhelming with the pass rush right now. Even Kenny's not beating his blocks. Devontae Wyatt's been the best player on the Green Bay Packers on their defensive line, and unfortunately, he missed 3 games. So it's a shame to see, the state that they're in. TJ Slayton has definitely underperformed, and in a contract year, you have the edge. It's Lucas Van Ness just hasn't developed a pass rush move yet, and it's crazy because coming out of college, he was a bull rusher. He could just take you and move you back. And that's where I know that I pitched this whole time to add a piece like Zadarius. It's a shame that you see during the trade deadline, he ends up going to the Lions for a 5th-round pick and a 6th-round pick swap. So the opportunities were there to make a trade, but I think that Goody that's not his style. He's not a guy that's going to try to add through trades last minute. He's not a rental kind of guy. And I think, unfortunately, this year, you're just going to have to play with what you have. The cavalry is not coming. You're not going to have new players magically appear unless you're getting them off of either other teams' practice squads or, free agency. But I can't tell you a name that really stands out to me that's going to be our savior. That's where it's just like, you just got to go to the young guys. You got to hope that Mosby can develop. You got to hope that Van Ness can develop. You got to hope that they can really step up and look at each other from this type of a move and say, hey, Preston was the guy that was here. He was the leader of our group. That's not the case anymore. Now new leaders got to establish themselves. New guys have to come in and make those plays. You know, it's sad to see because I feel like Hafley, his defense really does need pressure to be at its all-time high, because you do have a good backfield, you have good safeties, you have good corners when they're healthy, except for Eric Stokes. But that's besides the point. Like, there's moves that need to be made, and I do think this team is going to build through the draft. So hopefully, come this time next year, the Green Bay Packers have a lot more, pieces. But for their defense this year, they're not going to win any games strictly through their defense. Now, that being said, though, they did keep the Lions, the number one scoring defense in the league, to 17 points. And you did have the rain. You had things that were limiting the Lions too, but they still did do enough that they could have won that game. It was just the offense had a lot of issues with the drops. Offense had a lot of issues with Jordan Love throwing that pick six. There were things that definitely, it wasn't complimentary football.
Yeah, I
And
mean, when you think about it, right? Like, take that pick six off the board and put a missed field goal as a made field goal for Green Bay. This is a tie football game. This is a
yep,
17-17 game.
yeah,
So, uh, did they do enough to win in the game? Obviously not. But like, were there opportunities still to win this game despite everything going on? Absolutely. I just hope that Halfley doesn't give up on his scheme, because I really like what he's doing. I just think that he doesn't quite have the pieces to run it not run it efficiently. I think he's running it to the best of his ability. I just think that he's not getting the production that he'll get out of a successful draft, and with some more experience out of the guys that he's got. I think they have a great like all the negativity and stuff like is only because we're seeing repeated failures in the same area of the Green Bay Packers, which is the defensive line right now, and some edge rushing issues and stuff like that, right? But all in all, I think that we have a good group. I think the guys like that we brought in this year are great. I think Evan Williams is phenomenal. I think that Edgerrin Cooper is phenomenal. Like, I think they're going to be great pieces for the Green Bay team. But to be great in this organization or in the National Football League, like, you don't just need to be great individually. You have to be great as a team. And like, you need help. You need help on that defensive line, for guys to get free and be able to do their jobs. And what is the most common reason for interceptions in the NFL? Well, it's pressure, right? That's what we know is we force guys into making some questionable decisions, or timing throws turn into early throws or late throws, and then you get interceptions out of that, right? So like, we're doing fine in the interception category, but we're not doing well in the pressure category, which tells me we have elite coverage groups that are able to go and make plays on the ball.
yeah,
And I think the ceiling is incredible for this team if they're able to put some kind of pressure on the offense off of that D line. And we don't have to spend too much more time on this, but I mean, like, think about that for a second. How good is the Packers coverage group that we have, the amount of interceptions that we have, and we still have the top tied safety in the league that has the most interceptions, with the lack of defensive pressure that we've been able to put on the quarterback. That in and of itself speaks huge to the group of guys that we have back there. It's just we need to add pieces, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do that this year. We're going to have to wait, and we're going to have to build, and we're going to have to work hard in the offseason. So,
yeah,
Dave,
definitely. Oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, keep an eye on the young guys. That's all you can do at this point. Hope that something clicks. Hope that we make that run, because I mean, it's possible. It's happened in the NFL before. Young guys have stepped up. Still a whole lot of ball game left to play.
Athlete, when you watch this, don't change what you're doing, please. We like you. We think you're doing a great job. All right. So
Wait,
this
one
begs.
more thing. One more thing too. I just want to add, because I know you mentioned the fact of Aaron Jones tweeting about how, hey, they're trying to get rid of all of us and everything. Aaron, it's not personal anymore, man. I know that you're hurt, but as a fan of yours, as somebody who always cheered for you, just just stop, man. I know you're going to come back to Green Bay one day. You're going to be an alumni. We're going to have great times. We're going to enjoy a hot dog with mustard and caramelized onions. It's going to be fun. Just stop taking the pop shots right now. I get it. Hurt people. And that's where we're at right now. You turned on us, not in a way of you weren't the one that released yourself, but you went to the Vikings. That hurt me.
Aaron, Dave, if I had to listen to a fan base at every home game, stick their hands above their heads, and pretend that they were Vikings when they are clearly not, they're just alcoholics. I also, a state, man, a state which went blue too, by the way. So that should tell you a lot about where Aaron Jones is playing right now. I'm just going to throw in a political opinion. Everybody else is using their platforms to do it. Why can't I? But anyway, if I had to hear all that, I would be salty too. I'd be on social media berating whoever I can. It's not personal, Aaron. Don't worry about it. Nothing with Preston is personal. That's a business decision, and the league is full of business decisions. But the Packers need help on the D line. Unfortunately, he's not a guy who was helping us. He was hurting us, and that's why he's not a Green Bay Packer. So let's move on from here, Dave. Let's actually it begs the question, where do we go from here? The Green Bay Packers are now a 6-3 football team, and we're kind of at that midseason mark now, with it being 17 games in the season. So, we're kind of a football team that has had some back and forth. We have some clear struggles. We just talked a lot about what those are. But the question then becomes, where do we go from here as an organization for the rest of the year? I think that one thing we can kind of do is make some predictions. We always, in our beginning podcasts at the beginning of the year, make some predictions as to how well the team will do collectively, but we can kind of reassess that in the middle of the season here and say, hey, this is what I think the team will end up doing. And then kind of give some kind of forward insight into what we think that we'll do in the off season, without it taking too much time here. So, Dave, my question to you is, this is a 6-3 football team right now. What do we end up at by the end of the season, and what do you see the postseason looking like, if there is one for the Green Bay Packers in your mind? And then we can kind of get into some other questions here in a minute.
So far this season, I see a team that is still very young, and they've beat themselves in the games that they've lost. But there also have been games where they've come back and they've played good, and they've shown that they have a lot more fight than they did last year. And if you go off of last year's template, that second half where they really started gelling and becoming more of a team unit, they were something special. I don't know if you can recreate that magic, but if you can, I see this being a 12-5 team. I see us winning at least 6 more games. You got to think that at least Minnesota won't be able to do the same thing that they did to us last time, where they get out to a 28-point lead. Even with Detroit, you play at Detroit at Ford Field, you don't have the weather conditions. You're in a dome. The Packers are just as good of a team as the Lions. If you just clean up a couple of things, pre-snap penalties, you end up getting a little bit more complimentary football. I think this team still does have the talent to be something special. Also, assuming no injuries, but you can't predict injuries, so I'm not going to go too deep into that. Stay healthy, gel, get to be where we need to be. Have Jordan clean up a few things with the hero ball. 12-5 probably ends up being I want to say the number 5 seed, because I don't see Minnesota keeping on track the whole year. I wouldn't be surprised if we were the 5 seed, maybe 6 seed, because the Eagles do have the tiebreaker over us. So 5 to 6 seed, I see us at least winning a game in the playoffs, and the optimist in me really sees this team being able to make a run. This could be a Super Bowl winning team. It's just the fact of they have to gel. And me as a fan, why are you a fan? You are a fan to see them win the game. That's why you root, that's why you cheer. I'm not watching a team that I want to lose. Give me a team that's going to make that run, get it together. Maybe pass rush isn't there, but unless if the Packers don't make it to at least the NFC Championship game, I don't find this to be as successful a season. But that being said, still Green Bay Packers beating the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl.
Wow.
Give me that. Just don't give me the Ravens. They're the only team that legitimately scares me in the league right now.
So it's ironic that you say that, because I'm going to get there at the end of my rant here. Um, I see this being an 11-6 football team for the rest of the year. I think that the issues that we're seeing early aren't going to be resolved by just the bye week. We're going to continue to have struggles on the D line. We're going to continue to have hero ball on the offensive side of the ball unless we take measures to correct that. And I have yet to see that this season. And I can only go off of what I see every week that we play. And like you're saying, I think we've had some great weeks with some competitive matchups where everybody's been healthy, where things have been very, very good. I've also seen the Packers do some things, especially Jordan Love in these games, and I like, it's definitely a throwback to Favre, right? Like everybody's like trying to squash that narrative that he's Brett Favre, but like in some ways, right? Like the kid is like that. It's live and die by the hand, and like Brett Favre's a Hall of Fame quarterback. Like I'm not taking anything away. I'm not taking anything away from Jordan Love by saying that, but he just makes some questionable decisions, and like and he's still the front runner for the team regardless. So,
Arguably, though, you could say Brett Favre is a lot more shaky.
you could say that. You could say that. But nonetheless, I think that you're going to continue to see some of those struggles. I think that, it's interesting that we have a lot of division games that are later in the year that are going to come down to some, it's going to weigh on who wins those games. We talked about that a few times too, is like, we're going to have games that weigh on who wins the division or like, who's making the playoffs like that. That very well may be the case with our division games this year. We still have 2 games with the Chicago Bears who are struggling immensely, right now on the offensive side of the ball, but have a pretty good defense. So, like, we could see a quarterback shootout between Green Bay and Chicago in both games. Do I think Jordan Love is better than Caleb Williams? 110%. It's not even close, in my opinion, just from what I've seen out of Williams. But if the Packers defense does not come to play and we can't do certain things like get pressure on a young quarterback, then like Caleb Williams can do Caleb Williams things and maybe he looks really good and he's not. So, those could be struggle games, but I think that we still managed to beat the Bears twice the way that we're playing right now and the way that the Bears are playing right now, unless, again, something drastically changes. I think we take the second game against Minnesota, and I think that we probably lose the second game again to the Lions at home, unless it's a game where the Lions already have a playoff spot locked up and they're just buying their time. So, I think that's kind of the way that shakes out. We'll see how it all unfolds. I just think there's a couple struggle games left. There's always a couple every year, and they really haven't had them this year. I thought that the Cardinals game was going to be one where it was like, ugh, this is going to be one of those games where we're going to just struggle to succeed, and they surprised me. So I'm hoping that they exceed expectations, and that's not something that that we have to worry about. But that is what I'm expecting: is some defensive struggles and some offensive kinks to work out still. So I say we end up 11-6. I say we make a run at the playoffs as a 5 or 6, like you're saying, seed. And I think it just depends on the matchup, to be quite honest with you. Who we're playing in that first round is going to matter. And then if they can build momentum off beating, I would like to see them against a higher seed and beat the higher seed, kind of like Dallas. It'll give you a little bit of confidence going forward, and guys tend to play a little bit better with some confidence. And, I think that they could go all the way to the NFC Championship. I don't think that we'll see the Niners there this year, which is a good thing for us because that seems to be our kryptonite. But, it just depends on matchups. So I think there's a chance they can go to the NFC Championship game, but I do see them making the playoffs. I'm not going to guarantee an NFC Championship at this point with what I've seen this far. Again, if that could change in next week or the week after, like if I'm seeing some different things and some better decisions and better schemes and ability to do things, then that might change. But for right now, that's what I see. I do see whoever ends up winning the NFC side playing the Baltimore Ravens, though. The Chiefs are not the same Chiefs this year that I've seen in years past. And, everybody's going to praise Patrick Mahomes and, give him all the credit in the world for being Patrick Mahomes and everything that he does is great. But, and he is a great quarterback. He's, probably going to be one of the greatest of all time when this is all said and done. But I don't think the Chiefs are the same. I don't think they're pushing all the way. The Baltimore Ravens are very scary.
It's
And
all fun and games though until all of a sudden Patrick Mahomes throws over the middle. Oh, Kyle Hamlin, what do? You just hit the Chiefs player, ejected. Oh, the
that's
coach has a problem with it. Harbaugh ejected.
well
Oh,
now. If that does happen, everybody's going to turn and say, "Well, the Packers did it first," so it's going to be just all eyes on us. Like, why did your franchise get hit in the head? So, yeah, I think that's an interesting thing. In my last closing point for this whole where do we go from here is that ultimately, Dave, in the end of things at the end of the season, no matter where the Packers end up, whether they win a Super Bowl, whether they don't make the playoffs, whether they make a run, don't make a run, um, you know, we have to add pieces on that D line. That's my biggest stress. I think the offense is looking really good. It just comes down to decision making. But like I think there's potential maybe for another tight end in this whole situation. I like Musgrave and I like Kraft, but Kraft has emerged as the front runner for that TE1 spot, if you will. So
well,
um,
Musgrave's been out hurt too, so I mean he's been
right,
out for the last few. So I mean, there's
yeah,
guys who are going to step up.
you just don't know what tight ends because you're asking so much of those guys. You're asking them to block, you're asking them to do a lot of heavy lifting, and you're asking them to run routes efficiently. And so that becomes kind of a wearing position for guys to recover from big time injuries. So we'll see, man. Like we'll see where this all ends up at the end of the day. Um, I like Tucker Kraft a lot. I like Musgrave a lot. I just hope that maybe that's a consideration as some of the blocking schemes. But um, there's could you add a running back? I don't know. Maybe you know
I mean,
I don't know. But
Marshawn Lloyd's going to be coming off the IR, which he could step in there and all of a sudden do some things that we haven't seen. He came out of college definitely having that cut potential where he has something that the Packers don't really have with that quick cut, fast runner. So there's potential there for him to open up another like facet to the offense. But like we both said, it's more the defense that we're worried about than the offense.
yeah, I think the defensive pieces have to be added, and we have to retain the guys that we have. Like I wouldn't even be, listen, like hot take, but like I mean, Van Ness are never going to get rid of. He's too early in the organization for them to just like oust him. But Slayton, like Kenny Clark, even Eric Stokes, like you can out all those guys to me in this organization, and we don't get any worse as a football organization. Like you can
Well,
kick all out the door tomorrow and replace them with new players, like or veteran players or whatever the case is, and I don't think we get any worse. Like it can't be worse than what it is right now, to be quite honest.
I think coming next season, obviously Kenny just re-signed with that deal. I don't think they get rid of Kenny. I see them moving on from Stokes. I see them moving on from Slayton because they really haven't shown anything. Wyatt probably gets fifth-year option. I don't see them giving that fifth-year option to Quay. But honestly, if we get towards the end of the season, if I'm Matt LaFleur, I step up in front of that team and I tell them, and I ask every single player, have you ever seen a trophy in a kennel full of cats? Kyle, have you ever seen a trophy in a kennel full of cats?
I don't even know. I've seen a kennel with a cat, singular cat in it. So no.
They have them. They have these kennels that are just strictly for cats. And when you look, there's never a trophy in there. You want to know why there's not a trophy, Kyle? Because to win a trophy, to win a championship, you need some dogs. You need some woof woof tough guys who are going to go out there. Kenny needs to step up and be a dog. Rashawn needs to step up and be a dog. There's guys, Xavier McKinney is already showing he's a dog. We have guys who need to step up to win a championship. The Packers have this. We just can't be any kittens walking around. This ain't about Mondays. We're not eating lasagna over here, Kyle. We need to be some dogs. Woof, woof, win that chip.
I got nothing to add to that. I agree with your lasagna and cat rant.
It's not an anti-Garfield. We're actually the Lambeau Lounge is very pro Garfield. It's not about you, Garfield. We're not being a hater for you, but we need some. What was it Milo in Garfield, or was it Otis? I forget the dog's name.
Otis, yeah.
Otis. Yeah, we need some Otises. Too many Garfields right now. That's why you look at the Detroit Lions, they're biting off freaking kneecaps. Fucking Branch is munching on Bo Melton's kneecap while he's being ejected. The man's picking meat off the bone, being like, "Why are you ejecting me?" That's just the mentality you need to win.
Well, on that note, no one rip off anyone's kneecaps that watches this podcast, please.
Yeah, you could rip off a few kneecaps.
Dave,
Kyle.
it's been a pleasure, my friend. As always,
good time, buddy.
I'll make sure this one gets uploaded correctly. And
yeah, one more thing. Zadarius, I still miss you. I'm not mad at you. I'm just disappointed.
We'll address Z a different time. You can probably try to reach out to him on social media like I have, but it's not been working. So
yeah. But
Mr. T, if you made it this far, thank you.
Mr. T is pro biting kneecaps. The man hates kneecaps. It's probably part of the dress code at your daughter's gym. You have to wear pants because if you see an exposed kneecap, it's getting gnawed on. Not by you, Mr. T. Don't do that. That's a problem.
Mr. T's a dog.
Mr. T is a dog. Ain't no kitties in Mr. T's dungeon. That's all dogs.
Hopefully Mr. T doesn't have a dungeon.
Yeah, he's not coaching my daughter, so.
That's true. All right, man.
All right, brother.
Thanks for being here, brother.
Yeah, always a good time.
Yes, sir.